turn simple agricultural waste into fuel briquettes to replace charcoal. This then needs to become part and parcel of the conversation, because climate change most of the time has been looked as it's government to provide solutions, but it must be looked as each and every one of us to provide solutions.
I like that. We all have, a role to play. And it sounds great on paper when people convene and, they go to these, seminars and workshops, and we see all these reports being fired. It's glamorous. It's very glitzy and shiny. But, we need money to execute these ideas. We need actionable plans, and we need to also see them come to life. And one of the things that we must talk about is the money part. It's expensive. We're going to need to, pool our monies together. And of course, the continent needs to find ways to raise that money. And just to see more people getting involved. We can also involve, the private sector. What can we do to make this cash?
The reality is this. You can't put your eggs in one basket.
Right.
And I think this is set across the entire world, but in African context, we need to, first of all, again, like what I said, appreciate progress. As we're speaking today, the entire continent of Africa needs, in terms of implementing climate resilient actions, are over $3 trillion US.
$3 trillion US
dollars. But out of these, the continent contributes from their own contributions, from their national budgets,
right,
3 billion for adaptation. But this is not actually always out there.
Yes.
They're playing their part with the minimum resources that they do have. But so the big question should actually be, yes, in 2011 to 2015 to 2020,
right,
there was supposed to be 100 billion that was actually agreed by the global community to be given to countries to build climate resilient. But out of that money till today, only about 80 billion has actually come through, and Africa has only benefited about 20 billion, which is just about 0.8%, 0.6 to 0.8% of the amount that the continent actually needs. So the point is that if the continent can be able to contribute 3 billion in building climate resilience, can that money be leveraged in such a way that at least it creates an enabling environment to bring in private capital? And that is where there's not been actually accelerated effort. The other aspect that is actually missing in all this conversation is that Africa is an informal continent. And I think in the spaces of discussions, we don't really always hear this. You cannot have a continent of 1.4 billion citizens and forget the informality of its setup. 3/4 of the people live in rural areas. They do not have access to electricity. 620 million of them don't have access to electricity. Over 920 million Africans depend on unclean cooking. And the informal sector creates 80% of the job in the entire continent. And then at the same time, we have a population that is 60% youthful. Why I'm bringing this is that the informal sector is valued at 300 billion US dollars. That's the cash that can be tapped from them. But they're perceived as a risky sector because they are not linked to formal banks, and because of that high risk in which they have been perceived through that lens, that money could actually be tapped through initiatives that de-risk the process of getting them to do so. So if you take 300 billion and devise means to tap that by providing opportunities to the informal sector, to our mama mbogas, to our juakali actors, we will actually be tapping opportunities that solve problems, but tap into money that is actually lying down there, not being tapped.
Wow, there's a lot that you are shifting this morning in terms of the narrative